What's the risk, Mark?
The risk is a lot of people have to invest in a change agenda. Not everybody. You don't have to get in, but some retailers, if they, this is Main Street 101, right? I make X number of dollars now in my current situation, but if I made an investment in my business, maybe I could capture more people, or the folks who keep walking past my storefront, walking out of that restaurant. How do I capture that? That's an environment of opportunity, not one of kind of retrenching in loss.
Right.
So.
Did you want to jump in on that, Bernie?
Well,
You look like
mainly because, the story of how this started for the, all the merchants, this entire district was in the Market Square Association district. We had done an entire plan for the Market Square Association, and the Murphy administration, actually I just did the plan and I walked away and the merchants had their plan, and it had been a ground up kind of approach. In that plan, it called for reinvestment in the area. They all, for years, 10 years, 20 years, had wanted a facade grant program. So this was in 95. Murphy came into office in what year?
94 was his first year. He wanted
So,
93.
so 95 we did the plan. 96 we were supposed to get the facade grant program. So we lobbied the administration, and he said, this was, I want to say it was Leaper at the time, but I can't remember. But one of them said, look, Murphy wants it to go to Penn Liberty this upcoming year. Let us put it in the cultural district, and I promise you'll get it next year. And that's exactly what happened, was it went to Penn Liberty, and what happened next year was URP was on its way out the door. They had been working with the city on another development deal that fell through, the Center City Tower property next to Mellon. It had fallen through. So they, as they were leaving town, they said, oh, by the way, these guys want a facade grant program. Could you look at this for us? And literally, so what the administration was doing was responding to a ground-up community request for investment. They've never gotten a facade grant program, by the way. Not once, not one dime of investment. If you could do anything today, give them their facade grant program.
There's a facade
You're getting this on
program.
tape, right, Paradise? Like, okay.
In the Market Square district isn't qualifying district. It's
Tell
still
me
over
no.
at Penn Liberty.
No, there's a downtown, no, I'm positive are there downtown business people here? There's a downtown facade program. Whether it's robust enough to make change and be successful, there is.
Yeah, they want to kind of, and we were really specific on it, and that very program is what went to Penn Liberty. And the Cultural Trust continued to get, everything we were proposing was heading over to Penn Liberty. But anyway, so I hear Rob, and I hear what he's saying is, gee, that's what could have, and I think it started out that way. But again, there was something that went really wrong, in the process of meeting a community request to do things with the Main Street, kind of a door-by-door, business-by-business investment strategy, right?
Called deal junkies.
Exactly.
Of course, now, for those who are sort of following along at home, Leaper, who Bernie mentioned was Steve Leaper, who's the mayor's director of development, and, ran the Sports and Exhibition Authority, helped create Heinz Field and PNC Park with the help of your tax dollars. And there is now housing. I just was walking through the district earlier today. You can get a one-bedroom place. There's a one for rent. College students, take note. $1,950 a month. So,
Awesome.
so you get your like loft thing, that you get and all that. It would be great. Pat, let's question for you. You weren't. You don't own property downtown. You barely own property where you live.
Oh.
Yeah, I do
Don't
my
feel
best
sorry
to
for
bring
me.
the neighborhood values down, believe me.
What got you into this thing? And in general, I mean, you kind of, there were a whole bunch of other folks who kind of came along with you. Now your business partner, Tracy Jackson, some other people in the room. What was it that made people, and a lot of these stores at issue were, a lot of them were stores that you probably wouldn't have gone into otherwise, What was it about this particular district that rallied people beyond the ones that Bernie represented, who were just the ones with an actual direct stake in this thing?
Well, I work downtown. I spend every day down here, and I totally dug downtown. I was not from Pittsburgh. I'm not from here. I moved here because I visited a couple of times and said, wow, this city is amazing. And my wife and I like just up and moved here. Like people said we were insane. But when we got here, people really thought we were insane.
10 years later, it's
This
confirmed.
is, yeah, right.
They call it, in the business, they call that a setup. But the presumption, so the overall stupidity. I was in the real estate business at the time. I worked in retail real estate, and like one of the clients of the company for whom I worked was Urban Retail Properties. And like I knew like months before the announcement this was happening, because like the year before the ICSC convention, when these deals were being cut, I was there walking down the street with the dude from Urban Retail Properties saying like, yep, all this is gonna be a big downtown mall. And I'm like, we went past Candy Rama, and like I was with this dude because we worked with this dude. My boss was, good buddies with him, and we walked past Candy Rama, and I'm like, so, and that building that looks, whatever that is, it's like now being fixed up, but it's a really swanky building on the other side of the street from PNC's new building. I'm like, so are you tearing these down? He's like, oh yeah, this is all gonna go. I'm like, Candy Rama? And he's like, yeah, like 300-foot, the floor plate, it means nothing. And I'm like, and I literally said to him at the time, I'm like, I know you're from Pittsburgh and stuff, but like, and I've only been here for like 6 years, but I'm guessing if you think that Candy Rama doesn't mean anything to people in Pittsburgh, you probably haven't spent enough time here lately. And like, that was, I think, a central problem, like that I saw them so willing to do what Rob said, like, let's make this like every place else. Oh yeah, we did this fabulous development in Chicago, like we brought in all these, it's great, it's gonna be just like Chicago. I'm like, you mean the part of Chicago that sucks that I can't afford to go to? But the thing that really pissed me off, and that's what did it, was the presumption that this was being done to attract me. It was being done in my name. That it would get people, those nebulous people, young professionals, to come from exciting places like Washington, D.C., because we had like a Gap downtown. And like, it was just so ill-advised, and it was so like watching Dad try to dance. It's just, nah, that's not how it's done. And that it literally was one of those things where I had this moment where I'm like, no. Like, I'm no rocket scientist, but what they're doing is really stupid. And I think even I could do something better than that. So I did. I got like engaged and involved. And, because...
We thought you were a plant.
Yeah, totally. I showed up like a tool from a national retailer in a suit, for God's sake. But
that was not always as you see.
So, I can still wear a mean suit. Short sleeve
frequently wore a
preferably.
bag on your head in those days.
I was going to take the time to find the bag, but it's in the basement somewhere. But yeah, I mean, that was it. But I think also going back to the lessons, like what I learned was that this was a place, Pittsburgh is a city where if you get pissed off and you say, I'm going to show up and do something, you can do something. You can have an impact. You, as anybody, any idiot can show up and like get engaged and make a difference. And that to me was a lot different than I grew up in a town of 2,000 people where everybody did nothing. I suppose the same principle could have applied there. But like, I lived for years in DC, which is like, God only knows like what sort of sexual torment you have to go through to actually get to a position of power where you can have any level of influence, Or just be a go-getter, I guess. You could do that too. But
there's a second alternative.
not one that I learned. But no, I mean, like, and I thought that was a really cool thing about Pittsburgh. And if you regularly read the Post-Gazette, those people who write about like, I'm not from here, like, you see that again and again. People are like, wow, I actually can join my neighborhood organization and pay attention to me, So that to me was like, kind of the 1-2 punch, getting pissed off about brazen stupidity and like realizing that I could make a difference just as like a schmo. So, of course I had a suit, so.
Right, which made all the difference. Questions from the audience? I want to make sure I get a chance. Anybody? Because I'll go another round and then we'll come back again if there aren't any at the moment. I recall your story about going around the district with the New York people talking about what was coming down reminds me of Dan Fitzpatrick, who's no longer here, was a reporter at the Post-Gazette, told me this story about touring through the district with Tom Murphy himself, the mayor, and I can't remember what building Murphy pointed out. They were talking about something else. It was PNC, and Murphy said, "Oh, you see that building over there?" And Fitzpatrick said, "Yeah," and Murphy went. Which is just like, I never saw anything quite like that. I mean, I never heard a story quite like that until we were about to go into
Almost
Iraq.
impossible to quote.
Yeah, yeah, and he wrote it in the story. I wouldn't tell this story if he hadn't written it. And all he said is Murphy sort of gestured and made a rumbling sound in his throat or something like that. That was like the best you could do. Yeah, you can't really do the onomatopoeia.
You can't even spell it.
Yeah, right. It's just a B followed by a bunch of K's.
Murphy was no dummy. He said kaboom. He could have been quoted.
It was like when it was like before we went into Iraq, and there was a scene where the reporters from Time magazine were talking to somebody, and Bush stuck his head in and said, "Fuck that guy, we're taking him out." And then that was like, and they couldn't report on that because it was off the record until the war had already begun or whatever. So of such tiny anecdotes are history made. Assuming there are no questions at the moment, I'll go back to Bernie.
Just a quick one. You were talking about the president of the business association you were formerly working with at that time. And he kept his property, then later sold the restaurant before it went out of business.
Right.
How did he just walk away from all of this? Like, how did any of these guys just, I mean, was there any kind of...
Because, well, the plan ultimately didn't deploy,
Right.
so everybody
Well, I
walked
guess,
away. So everybody walked away with where they were. The dilemma was the cloud on the titles
Oh,
Mm.
sure.
of the properties, which is why there wasn't blight when we started, and it became blight because you had a cloud on all these titles, because nobody was sure.
Can I talk about socialism?
What do you mean? What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Well, this is the point. It was literally an artificial economy because the Urban Redevelopment Authority was going in and buying properties for the sake of buying properties.
Mm.
Nobody knew
Okay, I
what
see.
real estate was worth anymore. Like, you could say, no, I want $30 million, damn it, and
Mhm.
you might actually get it under the right circumstances.